we on? Welcome to Food is the Future. My name is Alec Baldwin, and I am thrilled to be moderating this event, the second of its kind today, jointly organized by youth organizations around the world and supported by CARE, EAT, WWF, GAIN, ICCCAD, and the Club of Rome. This morning, or very late last night for me, we were joined by a global audience from different parts of the world. We had politicians, scientists, business leaders, and most importantly, youth, all participating interactively. And while we likely agree that these groups are very different in many ways, they are bound by one common purpose, a vision of a better tomorrow, a vision that acknowledges the crucial role that transforming food systems must play if we are to live on a sustainable, resilient, and equitable planet that is better for all. That is why it is so great to see so many of you now joining us from around the world. In fact, my co-moderator will shortly introduce a poll that allows you to share where you are joining us from and what food issue is important to you. Please do participate. I also want to share that this event is being simultaneously translated into all 6 UN languages. So please share that you are with us, with the world, and comment or ask questions using the hashtag #FoodIsTheFuture and Food Systems 4, with numeral 4, SDGs, small s. Over the next 3 hours, we will hear from Action Track chairs and Vice Youth chairs on what their experience over the past 18 months of the summit process have been like, what they have learned, and how they feel now that the summit is upon us. We will talk about the key choices that need to be made to move cities, communities, countries, and citizens to accelerate movements that nourish both people and planet, and we will examine how we can translate this into concrete action. Perhaps most importantly, we will hear from so many of you, passionate and committed youth leaders from around the world, and the recommendations and priorities that you want to see coming out of the UN Food Systems Summit process. But before we begin, let me quickly share why I am here moderating this session. The reality is that it's very simple. I believe fixing food is the most urgent challenge of our time. Our future on this planet depends on a wholesale transformation of how we go about producing our food and what we choose to put on our plates. I believe that no one actor, no matter how large and influential, can fix food. It is up to all of us, politicians, business leaders, civil society, and yes, actors, all of us, to secure a better future. And if we can make it more fun and more tasty while we're at it, then we all win. Thank you for joining us around the global table to talk about how we unleash the power of food to build a better future for all. My co-pilot today is the incomparable Bibi. Bibi, over to you.
Thank you so much, Alec. What a wonderful presentation. I hope you're all hearing me correctly. My name is Bibi La Luz Gonzalez. I'm the founder of Eat Better Waik, and it is my super pleasure to be here with you and all of you who are joining in. And as you said, Alec, food is tasty. Perhaps you can tell us what you had for breakfast as well. Well, I had some fruits, some kefir as well with oatmeal. And what food systems means to me is that everything is intertwined with food, climate, and human rights. But somehow these concepts are still too distant for many for them to grasp in their day-to-day. So by bringing people together from diverse backgrounds, we can build a bigger change if they can relate with their preference, how they identify with, for example, language, comprehension, behavior towards healthy and tasty livelihoods. And also super important, let us not forget the value of women, especially our first food of life. So with that, and in the introduction video that we saw, and now with what Alec and what I presented as well, of what food means to us, we love to hear from you. So we are going to go into a poll. So you can access this on menti.com, Menti, MENTI, and you will enter the code that you will see on the screen. Thank you. Perfect. So you can see the code. Let's zoom in a little bit. So the code is 9405 5462. So you can put that into menti.com and please tell us where you're listening from. So we'll give that a couple of seconds. Please do so. We'd love to hear where you are from, since food systems is an international and global perspective. We're getting people from North America, South America, Europe. Well, I'm in Guatemala, which is in Central America. Alec, where are you?
City.
In New York City. All right, perfect. So you're in the 37% group of people, 50% from Europe, Africa, Asia, and we see that populating even more. We'll keep on doing that. And thank you so much for joining us today and understanding that it's a time zone for everyone, apparently. Thank you. All right. So thank you so much. All right. So I hope we have our first moderator for the high-level panel. And Radiet Abebe, are you here? All right, so I will be taking over. All right, perfect. Well, this is a great pleasure then to be introducing the high-level interviews. Then we get on the speakers. So we're going to have Joanna Truern, Thales Bevilca Mendoza, Esther Wanza, Jamima Anjuki, Jessica Vega, Amina Mohammed, and yes, they are here. Oh, and before that, we are going to have a first message from the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed.
Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, thank you to the Food Systems Summit Youth Constituency and the chairs of the action tracks for organizing this important event. We have a unique opportunity to shape the future of our food systems. When the Secretary General called for a Food Systems Summit nearly 2 years ago, our motivation was to change gears and really accelerate action to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. The SDGs are, above all, about transforming our present to create a better future. And the future belongs to the young. That is why we have been so committed to ensure that young people have a leadership role throughout the entire process. Today, we are reaping the rewards. Together, we have facilitated an inclusive process and leveraged the power of our collective ideas. We have brought new actors to the table and put their concerns and ideas on the table. Our new approach to multi-stakeholder leadership engaged over 100,000 people across the world to think through what sustainable food systems should look like in their own unique context. The integration of youth in the leadership of the summit's action tracks, champions networks, and independent dialogues is a great example of co-leadership and a model for future global processes. I have personally been inspired by young people bringing their perspectives and solutions on how we can shape a better food future for all. And I was pleased to learn that the Youth Declaration at the pre-summit recognized the right of everyone, everywhere, to a healthy diet, a cornerstone of our collective efforts to realize the SDGs. Young people are not waiting to take action and make a difference. They are stepping up and speaking up for equitable, sustainable, healthy, and resilient food systems. Ahead of tomorrow's UN Food Systems Summit, we count on everyone to keep up the momentum. Together, we can transform food systems and create the world we want and need. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed, for that wonderful message. And I'm super honored to be presenting the following high-level panel that we will be touching on a general question of what did we learn from the UN Food Systems Summit, especially from the pre-summit that was held in Rome, and for tomorrow on actions of how to shift our food systems. So we'll have with us, I hope they are here in the room as well. All right, thank you. So Joanna Trewarn, thank you so much for joining. Joanna is a sustainable diets and behavior change specialist at WWF in the UK, where she's exploring how food systems actors, including policymakers and food companies, can help citizens adopt healthier, more sustainable diets. And you're also pursuing a PhD, Joanna. Congratulations on that. Wow, that is a huge achievement. I hope you're doing well with a thesis so you're doing that on sustainability. And basically, well, I won't be telling more about what you do, so I'll give the mic to you. So now that you heard the message from the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, what do you respond to that message?
Thanks so much for that wonderful introduction, Bibi. It's great to be here and to be part of this important event. First of all, I would just like to extend my thanks to the UN Deputy Secretary General, Her Excellency Amina Mohammed, for her powerful and inspiring message that we've all just heard. I will now share my reflections and perspectives as a young person who has been involved in the UN Food Systems Summit process. Her Excellency Amina Mohammed has rightly described the commitment of the UN Food Systems Summit to ensuring leadership roles for young people. I have had the privilege of being part of the leadership team for the Sustainable Consumption Action Track, where I've been supporting this important work for the past year. Being involved from such an early stage alongside a number of other young people from across the globe has facilitated the meaningful integration of youth perspectives and ideas. As Her Excellency highlighted, universal access to healthy, sustainable diets is the key food systems priority for global youth, identified through the UN Food Systems Summit process. This is indeed a powerful vision, but it won't happen without intervention from key actors, including policymakers and business leaders, as Alec Baldwin also pointed out. We are at a pivotal moment for collective decision-making. The UN Food Systems Summit has demonstrated exemplary engagement of young people thus far. Yet, this engagement will only have been meaningful if the priority of youth is acted upon. Driving the adoption of healthy, sustainable diets is crucial for a just, equitable, and sustainable food future. Improving food production practices, including transitioning to regenerative agriculture, is vital, but it must be accompanied by a dietary shift. To that end, healthy, sustainable diets must be made a priority at the UN Food Systems Summit tomorrow, including through the creation of a Healthy Diets and Sustainable Food Systems Coalition. Setting this precedent will encourage action beyond the summit, which is vitally needed to reverse the tide on diet-related ill health, to meet climate targets, and to restore nature. Support from member states and business leaders on this topic is critical to ensure ambitious and much-needed progress. As a starting point, governments and businesses should include commitments and strategies on healthy, sustainable diets at the heart of 1.5-degree climate and nature commitments. Young people understand the importance of healthy and sustainable diets for the health of people and the planet. We have taken action for healthy, sustainable diets. Now we call on decision makers worldwide to do the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joanna, for connecting everything as well that was said throughout this period of time and what you're also envisioning. So now we'll give the floor to Dr. Lia Tadesse, Minister of Health of Ethiopia, and Esther Wansa, MGCY Africa Regional Point in support of the Food Systems Summit. So Dr. Lia Tadesse is an Ethiopian politician serving as Ministry of Health since March 2020. Prior to her appointment, Lia served as State Ministry of Health from November 2019, and so on as well on your incredible background on health. And Esther Wanza, you're an energy business mentor at Energy for Impact, also regional youth focal point of Africa in support of the Food System Summit. So thank you for being here, and with the name Food is the Future, and considering these are key elements to make youth incredibly participative in all of these food systems transformations. I would love to just get your point of view of how we are transforming these food systems, and what can we learn from what we have seen throughout all these years about shifting our food systems, and what can change look like now that we move forward if we include fully youth in this.
Thank you very much, Bibi. I hope you can hear me. So it's a pleasure to be joining this important session on food is the future, and Ethiopia recognized delivering the SDGs will require transforming our food systems. And so we participated wholeheartedly in the UN Food Systems Summit process with a long-term shared vision for our country, a vision for a holistic transformation of Ethiopia's food system from production to consumption that promotes enhanced food safety, nutrition and diets, and improved livelihoods with greater land preservation and restoration and greater resilience to shocks and stress. This is the food system we want our youth, our children, and our grandchildren after them to inherit. So transforming the food system for us is about assuring the social, economic, and environmental well-being of our society. So through these months of the summit process, we had engaged in an extensive consultative process that began with the development of a background paper articulating our challenge and the rich policy and program environment that we already have around food systems that we could leverage. And this informed our first joint consultation of the government of Ethiopia with the Global Panel on Agriculture and Food Systems national dialogues. And this process included calls for game-changing solutions, from which we were happy to receive about 83 submissions, which later culminated into 22 prioritized game-changing solutions that we grouped into 6 clusters or focus areas. And on the 15th of July 2021, we officially launched and adopted these 22 game-changing solutions designed to transform the Ethiopian food system along the 5 action tracks. And the pre-summit in Rome also was an opportunity to consolidate these efforts. So our 6 cluster areas have been mapped to contribute to all 17 SDGs, and we are now in the midst of constructing our roadmap consisting of actionable interventions for these identified game changers, and timeline, as well as resource estimation, mobilization, and allocation of tasks among key organizations with also an M&E framework. This process has boosted our commitment to implement the Ethiopia Food System Transformation Pathway to realize our vision, and hence we boldly want to enhance especially agricultural production and productivity, ensure food security with healthy diet-centered lens, and align the efforts for collective impact. And for this, we plan to roll out this Ethiopian food system plan to the local, the lowest level where actual implementation occurs, and work with different level, including the Council of Ministers, parliamentarians, to enact relevant legal and policy provisions, and continue to engage with the different stakeholders, especially the private sector, innovators, youth groups, technologists, our national and international partners, and the community at large in the evolving process of our food system. So we therefore call upon all stakeholders in Ethiopia and beyond to find their unique entry points where they can help us by making their own commitments to contribute to accelerating the positive momentum on this 10-year food system transformation pathway, And I also take this opportunity to thank the contributions of all government, development partners, and all stakeholders for providing their unreserved various contributions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Leah, for your remarks, and I'm happy to hear made towards food systems, and where the youths in all these, because we know years to come, young people will experience the effects of the challenges facing our food systems if action is not taken. I believe, given the proper support, young people are key force in addressing the root causes of the unprecedented challenges, because they have fresh ideas, a strong grasp of emerging trends, and are up for the challenge of trying new approaches. This has been proven in the past 18 months, where young people have deeply engaged in the summit process as co-leaders and also participants in the dialogues, all with a similar voice of advocating for a better food system, which is equitable. I think if we are not going to involve young people in the transformation agenda, and you can agree with me, efforts in dealing with the current state of our food system in order to secure the future of our youths. You must raise the ambitions and take all the necessary steps to ensure a fast, inclusive, and equitable food systems. Young people must be instrumental. And maybe this brings me to my question. With the current state of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has serviced so many gaping holes in our food systems, and the most affected are the youth and women, decision-making process. As a policymaker, what are your proposed actions to ensure just recovery and food system transformation? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Leah and Esther, for those points. And being a bit young myself, I think it's also I thank every opportunity that I'm being considered, and not just in small spaces, but like in these. So thank you so much for your remarks. Now we'll go with some other speakers as well who are joining. So we have Anders Nordstrom. Anders is a medical doctor from Karolinska Institute in Sweden. He's ambassador of global health at the Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Stockholm. And you have served in numerous organizations as well all around. And we'll also have a response of what you'll be saying by Thales further on. Here is Thales. Hi, everyone. So glad you're all here. I hope you're all excited in this Food is the Future. Sure, I am. So Thales Bevilacqua Mendoza. I hope, espero que o sotaque ou também como estou pronunciando seu nome está bem. Thales is a secretary from the Intercontinental Network of Organic Farmers Organization, INOFO Latin America, and you have a diverse expertise in agroforestry in Brazil, growing tons of vegetables, mushrooms, and also foresting. So it is my pleasure to have you both here. So please, I love your remarks of what are the actions needed to move forward in the food systems transformation based specifically on the pre-summit and tomorrow, and of course, putting youth at the center.
No, thank you very much. And thank you very much for your energy. I just wish you had also said a few words in Swedish, but I suppose that's a more not so commonly known language. But pleasure to be with you and also to see you, Thales. Great. I'm a keen, not farmer, but at least a gardener with a big garden, growing my own vegetables. That's one of my top priorities, to have the best quality vegetable as possible and for dinner. But that was not what I was going to share with you. I mean, there's been a fantastic year now leading up to the summit, and I think 3 messages from me and from the Swedish government in terms of what we have learned and what we take with us from the whole process, both up to the summit and also beyond the summit, because the work is, of course, not done now. The first one is, of course, just the word system. That this is quite different. I mean, looking back to the past, we were speaking about health, we were speaking about the environment, about agriculture, but de facto now we have been speaking about how do we move from production to consumption, but also avoiding waste. And this sort of the full chain here, going from the farmers to the ones sort of selling the food to us, but also to us as consumers. How do we manage a systems approach to this? It's easy to say, but if we look at systems across the world today, most governments are organized according to ministries, departments, sectors, and to take a systems approach, I think is really what we now need to take very serious, because that means a totally different way of working. We can't no longer having just Minister of Agriculture to lead, or just having the farmers, or just having the doctors. We need to ensure that we think around the system. And by a system, we need to think about what is the ultimate outcome that we would like to achieve. So that's my second sort of reflection looking back, is that we have a great opportunity here now for a win-win situation. By investing in better food system, I mean, we will be able to improve not just people's health. I'm a global health ambassador, been working on health now for 30 years, but also the planet's health. So, I mean, what is good for the planet and what is good for people's health, food is really at the center. About a third of the negative climate impact is coming from how we produce, consume, and waste food. And the same thing is true on the health side. The negative side, the health risk for people, not just in terms of lack of food, but also the overconsumption of food is really having the biggest health impact of people right now. So there are win-win situations here. So systems approach is to focus really off the actual outcomes and taking them a systems approach to see how we can collectively towards those goals. And the final and the third one is then that now the title of this meeting is about the future. And that's why it's extremely important to have not just me, who is now reaching retirement and being around for some time, but also the younger generation. But we need this intergenerational dialogue, because this is a common responsibility. It's not just about us taking responsibility for the future or leaving it to you. It's about us doing it together. So this intergenerational sort of dialogue, discussion, bringing in different perspectives. I mean, I have some perspectives after 30 years. You have some different perspectives that I don't have. But bringing those to the table, I think we can do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Anders, for your contribution and your holistic perspective, and it was great to hear from you. From my side, before response directly the questions, I would like to ask and also reflect, do we want to have healthy food to feed our generation and the future ones? And I think the answer is, of course, yes. From our side, as a young farmer, we have learned and emphasized that we need actions aimed at the urgent transformations because time is very short. We did not only discuss the issue of having food, which of course is fundamental, but also the quality of this food for people and the way it's produced, aligned with the principles of nature. And we, the youth, represents a fundamental role for this change to take place. We young people who are producing food on the ground seek and are more open to agricultural practices based on respect for people and the planet, using practices such as agroecology and organic and regenerative agriculture, associated with technology that helps us in production. We need the support of all sectors within food systems, especially governments, international agencies, and the private sector. We are not only talking about healthy relationships between us and the planet. I think I have some issue with my camera here. Sorry, I'm talking with all of you from my farm, so maybe my connection is not that good. hard wind right now, but if you can hear me, I keep going. I'm sorry. I will take back my speech. So we are not only talking about healthy relationships between us and the planet, but in all relationships, including the presence, protagonisms, and equity of human, minorities, and youth for a true social transformations. To finish, I would like to ask you, Mr. Anders, what are Sweden's plans for making healthy diets affordable and accessible to all? And how are those plans linked to your national food production? Thank you very much.
All right. So
Thank you. This is a top priority for Sweden, both to do this in Sweden. Is it okay? I was deconnected for a while, but now I'm back. But I got the question. Should I go ahead, Bibi?
Okay. Yes, please go ahead.
No, just to say, I mean, this is a top priority for Sweden. And to work along the full sort of systems line here, as I said, to work with the Swedish producers, but also how we work with producers from other parts of the world, but looking for the best possible solutions where we try to have as little impact on the climate as possible. So to allowing the production, the producers, to make the transition that is needed, because the transition is needed and the producers need support for this. But I would say possibly the most important thing when it comes to moving towards where we would like to go is to work on the consumers, on people's attitudes, behaviors, knowledge, to see how we can have that change of interest, but also values and culture in society. That people today are very much valuing that things should be green, it should be climate smart, but realizing that that food is really a big part of this. So by the demand from the consumers, but also enabling the consumers then to make the right choice by having the knowledge, but not just the knowledge, but also to be able to afford what are the good things, but possibly then ensuring that they avoid the bad things by increasing the prices there. And then finally, also that they feel that they can actually make the right choices. And I think that might be the most important one, that the peer pressure, your friends feels that this is the right thing to do. That's how we can have most influence. And I mean, we're working on that across the society, but then especially in schools among younger people, starting from very early days, to make sure that there is good food in the schools, but also that young people get a good relationship to food, that they enjoy food, that this is something pleasant, and they understand how important the way that we produce and consume food is for the climate, but also for their own health.
Thank you so much, Anders and Thales. And since you wanted something in Swedish, we'll say to you, tack, tack. And to Thales, I'll say obrigada. And thank you so much for both. And I love to transition to the following speakers on that sense of feeling, having that emotion. Food is not only this thing, but it's a feeling that we have the power of choosing adequately and how we relate with food in that. So next up, we have our next speakers, Jamima Anjuki. Jamima is the director for Africa at the International Food Policy Research Institute and the custodian for gender equality and women's empowerment for the UN Food Systems Summit of this year. Jamima, welcome. And you will have also the response by Jessica Vega. She's the co-chair of Global Indigenous Youth Caucus. Jessica Vega is also, a young Indigenous woman from the Mixteco people. Muchísimas gracias. Welcome. And it's wonderful to have you both here. So we will go on the same line of what is expected from the UN Food Systems Summit. What have we learned from it, and how to incorporate youth, and especially loving the perspectives on gender and Indigenous populations. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bibi. So great to be here. So as the custodian for gender equality and women's empowerment for the UN Food Systems Summit, one of my roles has been to make sure that the voices of women, and especially young women, are heard in the food systems processes, and in recognition that we cannot achieve food systems transformation without achieving gender equality, because of the important roles that women play in the food system as producers, as processors, as traders, as nourishers, as our first defense against malnutrition, especially of children. So we have to transform food systems in ways that are just, that are equitable, and that engage and benefit everyone in a meaningful way, including men, boys, girls, women, and other groups. And so we've had some dialogues around the world, and we have learned a few things from these dialogues. That first, we need to fix our food systems so that they work for women. And very many times we have tended to focus on the women themselves as though they are the problem, that they're not as productive as they should be. But now we know that it is actually our food systems that are not working for them. And so we want, going forward, to take 4 key actions. First is to build women's agency, voice, and leadership in the food system, so that these voices are heard, so that they are taking action as leaders and not just as producers, to increase access to resources and especially their rights to land. Women are cultivating, producing food on land that they do not own, land that is dependent on their relationships as wives or as daughters. We need to respect and grant women rights to land. The third one is removing the institutional and legislative barriers that face women. We need feminist food systems policies that actually put women at the center of food systems transformation, and especially young women. And finally, there's a lot of harmful social norms that prevent women from benefiting, from being empowered, whether these are traditional rules that do not, promote gender-based violence, or that increase the unpaid care burden of women. We need to change and shift some of these cultural norms. And I do have a question for you, Jessica, because you stand at a very unique position and space as a young person, as a young woman, and also from an Indigenous group. My question to you is, how can we ensure that young people continue to safeguard, especially our Indigenous food systems that have been so important for women and for nutrition? And how do we combine the ingenuity that you as young people bring and the promise of technology to do this?
Thank you so much. First, I want to say that Tubati Quindo Snai. I am the great things for my community people. Thank you for all your contribution, but also for the question. Like one Indigenous woman and the mistake of Indigenous people is sometimes too hard to try to broken a lot of barriers. For now, for example, the language is the one barrier for the Indigenous community sometimes to access are the different platform. And apologies for my bad English, but as for us, it's really important to try to making the voices here and they try to not remain the silence, to try to empower for more Indigenous women and the Indigenous youth people, because I know that this model here is for the future generation, and then is the one commandment for us to try to combine the new technologies and when the traditional knowledge for the future generations. I think the priority now needed be like the similar to action like the climate action, for example, because it's really important to be responsibility for this Mother Earth. The young people not only are the consumer for tomorrow, is also the producers for the food. But today, sometimes the youth people, indigenous people, I feel a little exclusive from the decision makers, and this is affecting for us. Today, the leaders most listening first are the leaders of tomorrow. I think the youth people and also women and also indigenous community needs also ensure the participation and essential participation. Um, because the food system is not only the part of the eat, is also part of the identity, is also part of the culture, is also part of the healthy process. And then it's necessary to try to combine the technology, traditional knowledge, the new knowledge for academies. But this is not possible if we not starting for support the process. It is not possible if it with no to try to combine the ancestral knowledge, to try to understand how produces, to try to combine the generalization when the Mother Earth, and to try to support when the fundings, to try to support when the politics, to try to support when the commandments, all the older sector, not only the social civility, not only the producer, also the states agencies, and the also private sector, because the future is now important to take actions if we want to see new generation when healthy life. I think that for the side on the indigenous people, on the side of the youth people, and also for the gender people, to try to put the more energy, to try to put the more efforts. But I can be possible if we stay alone. I needed to try to be combining this action and the collective process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamima and Jessica. What a wonderful way to also incorporate, for example, the feeling that we had from before, and now exactly the language and the access towards tradition and technology, how to combine it, and of course also leadership from women. This has been super insightful, and I thank you for your words. And now we'll take on 2 questions from the audience. The first one is directed to Minister Lia Tadesse. And the question is, how is the government building buy-ins from stakeholders across the food system to roll out the national roadmap successfully, particularly considering what was happening on COVID-19?
Thank you so much for the important question. Indeed, the COVID pandemic has shown us there are many things different that we need to rethink in our systems. And when the process of this food system, the government from early on has started working on food and nutrition policy that has become in place around 2.5 years ago. And there's also a collective action to end stunting, that the government made a commitment to end stunting of under 2 years by 2030. And there are many initiatives. These are jointly done by different sectors. And this food system process has been led by Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Health, but engaging different ministries as well as stakeholders like private sector and others. But high-level engagement of government was there as a national agenda, because it is part of ending poverty and of ending malnutrition, stunting, as well as overall human capital development agenda. So that also, in particularly in light of COVID-19, and also other different challenges that we are facing as a country in terms of conflicts and internally displaced people. The food system issue is a big challenge. So we have also incorporated in the action tracks, in the game-changing solutions, issues like building resilience as part of this food transformation pathway, which is talking about especially resilience building in our systems, especially focusing to the vulnerable population like women and children. And just to cite a few examples, like digital fresh food vouchers are one of the issues that we are looking at. And our productive safety net program also is going to be highlighted within this progress. And school feeding programs, nationally expanding them, is also one of the key strategic priorities we are looking at, and getting all sectors engaged at different levels. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you so much for your time and words. Now we'll move on to the second question to Joanna Turn. And so the question from the audience goes a bit more towards insects. So what do you think and how can insects play a role as a high quality and more sustainable source of protein in the future?
Great question. So thank you to the person that sent that in. I think insects do have a really important role to play in a more sustainable food future. I think right now, where I personally see the opportunity is for insects to replace a percentage of soy in animal feeds. So at the moment, the way that we feed our livestock in kind of the dominant production systems is a key driver of deforestation. And that contributes in large part to the environmental impact of the meat and dairy that we eat. But growing research shows that actually you can replace some of that soy with insects. And I think that's really, really exciting, an exciting way for us to kind of diversify and start to change the way that we produce the food we eat to reduce its environmental impact. In terms of kind of how they are used for direct human consumption, I think there are already some really great examples of where that's happening, where insects are ground into flours and other food products. I'm not personally so sure as to how quickly insects would be accepted by people as a direct product to consume. I know it does happen, of course, in many cultures around the world. But in terms of kind of replacing meat at a really large scale, I think we're maybe a little way off. But I think it's definitely something that deserves more attention, particularly in how it can be integrated into livestock supply chains.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joanna. Perhaps young people can be the drivers of that change in including the insects in their diets. Well, thank you so much for your time, everyone. So we have concluded the first part of the high-level panel, and now we'll switch over to Alec.
Which future food issue is most important to you? We have 17 categories here. Do we have the graphic available so I can look at that? We have 17 categories here. Farming and agriculture, sustainable food production and biodiversity, human rights, health, nutrition and diet, sustainability and climate change, resilience and strength, food waste, plastics, water and sanitation, fairness and inclusivity, food security and access, animal welfare, and antibiotics. Those are 12. Do we have more than that? Or they're just 12? Okay. You can go to menti.com and enter the code you see on the screen now to make your selection of these options. We see that some answers are coming in maybe now. What are the most important topics to people? I know that for me, it's tough. It's a tough call between water and plastics, so two areas that I'm very firm about. Healthy water and getting plastics out of the waste stream if we can. So we see some results coming in. The leaders so far are 25% is sustainable food production and biodiversity. Fairness and inclusivity is second at 18%, now 17%. A lot of votes coming in right now, a lot coming in. The ones with the highest percentages so far, health, nutrition, and diet. But at 24%, the leader is sustainable food production and biodiversity. And my favorite there of plastics is on there, very small. But this is very important that we are able to prioritize what our concerns are, because there were so many issues involved in this topic. So still the leader is sustainable food production and biodiversity. And second is health, nutrition, and diet. Water, my topic, water and sanitation, is lagging behind. And so is plastics. Okay. Now, should we move on to the video? Oh, but why don't we have Bibi come and join us? Bibi, come on and tell me, would you take a comment?
Well, I was seeing the highest ones with sustainable food production, nutrition. I was also seeing like the 10%, climate was there. And then I was considering what you were saying about plastics, that perhaps we don't see it up front, but where does food come eventually when it gets to you? It's wrapped up in some sort of packing, and plastic is a big issue too. So that kind of relates as well with climate.
Well, plastic pollution in the water, which is affecting fish stocks and so forth. I mean, plastic is a really nefarious and very, very difficult issue to contend with. Now, I believe it's time for us to go to the video. This is a short video called "Youth Reclaim the Food Space. Food is Their Future." Let's watch this video.
Good food to me is a basic human right.
Good food is a food that respects indigenous communities, marginalized communities, peasants, and women.
Good food means to me a healthy and a wholesome diet which fuels the energy of the youth so that they are healthy both physically and mentally.
That are sustainably produced and responsibly consumed in a manner that ensures the most minimal wastage possible.
That will fuel my body, give me the right nutrients and boost my immunity to help me fight diseases. Remember, we're in a pandemic, right?
And what good food means to me is more than what ends up on the plate. It's thinking about the processes from the land, farm, grocery store, to the consumer at the end.
It is also happiness. Happiness for everyone involved in its production, from the one who grows it to the one who eats it, and the numerous people involved in between.
It means food that comes from a place where the harvesters are being treated ethically.
Connecting to the soil, connecting to the roots.
Good food to me is an innovative recipe that represents my culture, where my traditions and global ethic blend in harmony.
To me, good food means my family.
Good food should be fun. It should bring people together, not tear people apart. To ensure good food for all, we need to act with urgency, and we need to act with other people in mind.
throughout the UNFSS process. Over 2,000 solutions have been sourced from around the world. In this section, we will hear from some of the game-changing solutions. I'm excited to hear from 5 youth representatives who speak with those who have worked actively within the summit process and the action tracks. First, we will hear from Action Track 2 in conversation around a game-changing solution for ultra-processed food, together with Maureen Muketa. Welcome, Maureen Muketa, Youth Nutrition Advocate, member of the UN Food System Summit Action Track 1 leadership team, and a core group member of the Act for Food and Act for Change campaign, and Carlos Augusto Monteiro, Professor of Nutrition and Public Health at the University of Sao Paulo, Brazil, and head of the university's Center for Epidemiological Studies in Health and Nutrition. Thank you, Maureen and Carlos.
Thank you, Alec. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone who is watching us. And welcome to you, my panelist, Dr. Carlos. Please tell us about the game-changing idea that you seem to be really passionate about.
Thank you, Maureen. Together with some colleagues from Australia, New Zealand, UK, and US, colleagues in universities in these countries, we propose the solution we call for the incorporation of food processing in all food and nutrition policies. And why? What was the reason to propose this? It's essentially because although many types of food processing are very good, very positive for health, for the planet, for well-being, some food processing are harmful. And we are particularly concerned with food ultra-processing. And actually, when we see trends in dietary intake in worldwide, we see that people are eating more and more ultra-processed foods and less fresh and minimally processed foods and freshly prepared culinary preparations. And this change, this displacement of what sometimes we call real food, real meals, by these ready-to-consume products, they have enormous impact. First of all, on the pandemic of obesity, diabetes, and other chronic diseases. This is apparently the main driver of the pandemic. But there are other harmful effects on well-being, because these destroy food culture, for instance, and also on the planet. This generates a lot of plastic, garbage, and compromise also biodiversity, because these ultra-processed foods are produced based on 3 or 4 species. So then they contribute also for the loss of biodiversity. I can't hear.
Sorry,
Okay.
it happens again. Just to ensure we don't leave anyone behind, you've talked about ultra-processed foods. What's the difference between ultra-processed foods and processed foods? Because I believe the population is continuously growing, and there needs to be a change in how food is produced up until it's in our plate. So what exactly do we mean when we're talking about ultra-processed foods? Maybe you can start with that.
Well, yes, I think there's a consensus today that highly processed foods are not good for health. I mean, I think this is a consensus. But what is not a consensus is how to classify foods and how to define highly processed foods. In 2009, we proposed a food classification based on food processing. So this is the NOVA food food classification system. And essentially, it divides food items into 4 groups. The first one is the fresh or minimally processed foods, so foods that are really not modified in a way that they lose their nature. So here I will have all the grains, fruits and vegetables, frozen vegetables or pasteurized milk, etc. Then we have the processed culinary ingredients that are also very important because with processed culinary ingredients like salt and like oil, cooking oils, we need them to transform the first group into dishes and meals. And then you have the processed foods. Processed foods are the old stuff, bread and cheese. So other foods that are that come from natural food. If you take cheese, for instance, cheese is a fermented milk added of salt. So it's still milk. We have still milk there in cheese. Ultra-processed foods are entirely different. They shouldn't be called foods because they are formulation of food substances like starches, protein isolates, sugars, fats. These food substances are extracted from foods, as I said, from a few species like soy and corn and wheat. So all these, let's say, macronutrients, they are assembled together with a lot of additives because this assemblage doesn't have a taste or color, or they are not attractive. They are not palatable. Mm-hmm. And then with additives, with flavors, colors, and sweeteners, emulsifiers, and thickening agents, all these additives are needed to create what we call fake foods. So ultra-processed foods are poor imitations of foods and meals. And because of this, they are just imitations. They don't contain foods. And this is the main reason why they are associated with several diseases like obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease. The evidence today is very strong that this is the main driver of chronic diseases in the world.
I'm sorry to cut you short, Carlos, but just one last question. And I really like what you've said about these ultra-processed foods are an imitation of real food. But I wonder, how can, because obesity and non-communicable diseases are actually on the rise in low and middle income countries, and also briefly, how do you think we as the youth can get involved and help in propelling your game changer to the next level? Just briefly.
Yeah. So essentially what we need is to inform the population, to educate the population. So we need to have avoidance of ultra-processed foods in all national dietary guidelines. But still important, we need to have policies to make more accessible, more affordable, minimally processed foods and less affordable, less accessible ultra-processed food. Then we need taxation. So these products should be taxed the same way we do with tobacco. Marketing should be restricted. Again, the same thing we do with tobacco. And so marketing, taxation, and labeling. We need warning labels. And many countries started to put some warning labels in ultra-processed food to make clear for people that these are foods that have to be avoided. And how you could help on this. So one important thing is the fact that ultra-processed food are manufactured all over the world by transnational corporations. And these are very strong. They have a high economic and political power. And what they do, they boycott any regulation and they try to influence dietary guidelines to be more nutrient-based than food-based. So essentially, youth organizations can do is to put pressure on these corporations and to put pressure on the society to adopt the policies we need for having a better future.
Thank you. I think that is well answered. And I like what you have said about youth putting pressure on policymakers. And I believe this is why the Act for Food, Act for Change campaign is all about. It's a campaign that seeks to bring together young people from all over the world to be able to ensure that there are sustainable food systems, food that nourishes us and enables us to reach our potential. Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you, Maureen. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Maureen and Carlos. Next up, we will hear from Lana Weidgenant, Vice Chair of Action Track 2, in conversation with Dr. Ratan Lal, Distinguished University Professor of Soil Science at The Ohio State University, who will be talking about the Coalition of Action for Soil Health on behalf of Action Track 3. Thank you, Lana and Ratan.
Thank you for having us. Ratan, I'd like to invite you to take the floor and present your game changer to get us started.
Lana, thank you for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here with you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
I can. Looking
Well,
forward.
I'm glad to be here, and especially this very important forum and the topic we have, soil health. They're the basis of everything that we do. So I'm looking forward to the questions from you that I can respond to.
Could you get us started with a quick introduction of the game changer you're talking about?
I'm talking about the game changer from Action Track 3 called Coalition for Action on Soil Health. Several of my colleagues got together to launch and develop this program. I would specifically like to thank Leanne from ICRAF, Kelly, and colleagues from ICA, also Dr. Amuri from Sequana University in Tanzania, and many others, Dr. Sampson from IFDC, and they launched Coalition for Action on Soil Health. And the reason for the importance of that coalition is several-fold. For example, the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, I believe, only 9 years away, can never be met unless the soil health is taken care of. Why? Because the food and nutritional security depends on soil health. So the action, the Sustainable Development Goal number 2, how can you achieve it without soil health action? Climate action. We have already increased global temperature by 1.2 degrees centigrade, and we are increasing at the rate of 0.2 degrees centigrade per decade. So we cannot wait. And soil is one of the largest terrestrial sink for atmospheric carbon dioxide. For example, if the soils are managed properly, they could sequester as much as 1 metric ton of carbon per hectare per year as organic carbon. There could be some inorganic carbon as well. There's a rough estimate that between now and 2100, we could perhaps sink 180 gigaton of carbon in the soil of the world through better land use and management. Combine that with carbon sequestration biomass, another 150 gigaton. The technical potential of carbon sequestration is about 330 gigaton, a drawdown of atmospheric CO2 of more than 150 parts per million. So if youth can help us uptake, absorb, and find known carbon fuel sources, and at the same time promote agricultural land management practice, the climate change mitigation to within 2 degrees centigrade is still within our hand. That's why this coalition for climate action is very, very critical. Absolutely important.
I love that. And I love that you're addressing climate action. Quickly, I want to address the question that popped up beneath it, and which I would say that it's about both. It's about what you eat and where it comes from. But I also want to move forward with a question to you and ask, how can soil health and climate action contribute also to agroecology and these sustainable production methods as a form of taking action on climate change?
Let me answer first the question somebody asked, what is the impact on diet, food quality? Food safety and nutritional quality is absolutely dependent on soil health. For human nutrition, there are 17 micronutrients. They must come from a healthy soil. In fact, I teach in my classes that health of soil is strongly affecting the health of plants, health of animals, health of people, health of environment, and health of planetary processes. In fact, good soil health means good diet. It means good human health. That is simple as that. They cannot be in any way thought about separate. They are together. Health of soil, plants, animal, people, environment, and planetary processes is one and indivisible. And that's what this action track is. What we can do is tremendous in terms of climate change action. We can develop some policy. The youth can play a very strong, important role. Greta from Sweden, you remember she started the movement on climate change. She said, we demand that you give us this action to, and soil is a part of that demand. She's a role model. Malala from Pakistan is another role model. So you can really bring about transformative change. I'm looking up to you, youth, the future of the world, to bring about the transformation which is needed.
And we are counting on you as well. And I just want to quickly add to the discussion the points that you raised around, I think it's so important that soil health is part of it, but I would also add that we need that change in consumption as well. It is not just you fix the soil and it fixes everything. We need to work in these different areas that the Food Systems Summit is working on. So last question, because we do need to wrap it up, but I'd love to hear from you. What is your call to action for soil health? What do governments, businesses, and people need to do?
Well, first of all, going back to the consumption part, you're absolutely right. Unless we make a change in consumption pattern and our values so that we take personal responsibility in having a good food, which is good for human health, at the same time it's good for the planetary, that is a very important thinking, and bringing about that transformation, youth obviously has a very important. What you can do, you can help us bring about the transformation by educating the people, educating the policy makers. One thing which I think is very important is that youth can play a very important, bring about three-way cooperation between the academic people, such as myself, policymakers, the government, and the private sectors. This three-way cooperation can really bring about rapid transformation in translating science of known knowledge into action on the ground at the farm level by empowering farmer to do the good things. And you can play a pivotal role in that I can never overemphasize it.
Perfect. That sounds like a plan. Let's all work together and move forward in this action area and all of the other important ones as well. Thank you.
Thank you for questions and thank you for having me on this platform.
Thank you, Lana and Batan. Now I would like to hear the perspective of the Indigenous people and how they see food system transformation as possible. Frank Roy, coordinator of the Rome-based Indigenous Partnership for Agro-Biodiversity and Food Sovereignty on behalf of Action Track 4, and Hugh Ouyang is a food policy officer at the Good Food Fund, where he leads the Well-Being, Ecology, and Transformation Market Project. Thank you, Frank and Hugh.
Thank you, Alec. My great honor to have this opportunity to have this dialogue with Fran. So, Fran, nice to meet you. Please tell us about what the Game Changer is about, the Indigenous Peoples Trust Fund, and how it can be implemented. I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure for me to present the ideas that were discussed at the Action Track 4 and which have now been picked up by several other Indigenous communities and also Action Track. I just, to put a background, the former Secretary General of the UN, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, once said that our civilization seems to be caught in a global suicide pact. Our current life-threatening challenges are biodiversity loss, it has been mentioned earlier, climate change, the growing inequality. And our current food system is broken, unsustainable, and unequal, as we heard a little bit about the state of the soil from our famous Operation Love. But amidst all this, probably it's important to note that 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity is to be found in indigenous lands and territories. Thanks to their cultural diversity and local knowledge, indigenous peoples generate and share food while preserving and enhancing biodiversity. Their food systems, when not marginalized by dominant forces, are considerably food secure and equitable. We believe that these credentials, combined with their values of caring and sharing, uh, can put indigenous food systems as one of the important game changers for the UN Food Summit. And that is something that we hope they will have the wisdom, the humility, and the determination to do that. And therefore, when we were discussing at Action Track 4, we believe that if we are to transform, we need to empower indigenous food systems, we need to empower women and youth, and promote an inclusive approach to social protection of the vulnerable, including protecting the rights to their lands and territories if we are to overcome the current challenges. Therefore, we said, let's build the agencies, especially of indigenous youth, of women, by giving them confidence, self-esteem, intercultural knowledge, skills, and values. We also said we need to change power relations by integrating traditional food system wisdom with contemporary knowledge so that we do not trip on our respective blind spots and so that we can learn from each other's the methods that are acceptable and legitimate from the perspectives of indigenous peoples and modern thinkers and workers alike. And then we said we need to transform the structures by changing the narrative, by paying attention to nature-based local resources, by paying attention to soils, and by promoting social protection for improving resilience. And that's how the idea of the Indigenous Food System Fund came, basically to ring fence specific funds for indigenous food systems, which have been marginalized to a considerable extent. Our aim is that such a fund will provide resources to connect previously disconnected indigenous change makers, youth, holders of traditional and contemporary knowledge, through learning and intercultural knowledge processes for food security and livelihood. The fund will strengthen the agency of indigenous youth through training and specialist service so that they can lead the protection, the sustainable use, and above all, the revitalization of indigenous food systems for livelihood. So these were the main points that we had considered and which we thought are important as a game changer.
Thank you, Fran. Could you elaborate a bit more about why is this solution game-changing, the Indigenous Peoples Trust Fund?
We believe that it's the first important point when we look at the history of our development is that there is a need to bring about a better relationship with nature. And indigenous peoples have had that respect and that sacred relationship with nature. And this is extremely, extremely important, as we see, for the point that Dr. Lal has raised to preserve our soils, to make use of the land in a sustainable way, and also to be able to share and care for each other. And these are values that we have tended to forget in our focus with the modern food system, which consists only of maximizing and of looking at nature as a resource on which we maximize our returns. And that's one of the main changes that we want. And we feel that young people can play an important part if they are given the chance to do so and the skills, particularly the skills of combining their traditional knowledge, their traditional values with contemporary science development, but do it in a way that the co-creation is between equal partners who can gain from each other.
Thank you, Fran. Very insightful. And I think you have already addressed my final question, which is about how the solution address the challenge that youth in indigenous communities are running away from their native lands and original cultures. And I think you have already addressed that. And for the sake of time, I think we have to give the floor back to the moderator. And thank you very much for being here. And it's my great honor to do this interview. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I just want to highlight that among the 17 actions for change, which
did we lose him? Okay. Thank you, Frank and Hayu. Next, I would like to introduce Sarah Mantus, Action Track 4 Youth Representative from CARE, and Loretta Heber-Giraudet, Chief of the Risk Knowledge Monitoring and Capacity Development Branch at the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. They will discuss some of the game-changing solutions on systemic approaches to risk management on behalf of Action Track 5. Lastly, we will hear from Fadila Gobari, a business development professional and humanitarian activist in Yemen, and Saskia Assendarp, Executive Director, Micronutrient Forum, who will discuss a launch coalition for youth in African agriculture on behalf of Action Track 1. So please welcome Sarah Mantus and Loretta Heber-Giraudet.
Thank you for that introduction. It is such a pleasure to be speaking with you all today about youth's essential role in food systems transformation. For my first question, I'd like to ask, how will your solution on systemic approaches to risk analysis create resilience in food systems, and why is it a game-changing solution?
Thank you very much. It's very exciting to be part of today's event. On behalf of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. So let me say this solution is game-changing, but also urgent, because it provides tools to help ensure that future generations can live in a world where disaster risks no longer threaten the well-being of people, but also the future of the planet. And what it's aiming to do is to help countries keep pace with the rapidly increasing and interconnected risks that are threatening the resilience of food systems. I mean, let's face it, we're living in a world where risk is proliferating, and we are seeing really profound shifts in the frequency and the intensity of hazards. Whether it is the global pandemic or the floods in Germany or drought in Afghanistan, we know that disaster and climate risks are growing. And the recently released 6th assessment report by the IPCC has been crystal clear. It's the human action that's warming the planet, causing widespread and rapid change to the Earth's oceans, the ice, the land surface. So as far as these global commitments are concerned, we are not at all on track to reach the ambitious goals of the Agenda 2030, but also the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction or the Paris Agreement. And yet these global frameworks were designed very much with the future generations in mind, with an aim to really ensure the health, well-being, and prosperity for all. So building the resilience to multiple risks, and this includes climate and non-climate risks, really requires citizens to demand more preventive actions from their governments, but from other stakeholders as well, to better understand and manage these risks. I mean, we know what needs to be done to ensure that another COVID doesn't occur, or to ensure that climate disaster risks do not wipe out entire villages. And yet, are we actually taking that action? But really, beyond demanding political action, it's about tackling these drivers of vulnerability. And it really is the most vulnerable communities that suffer a disproportionate share of impacts from disasters. And they are the ones bearing the very heavy consequences of the COVID pandemic, but also of climate change. And these are the ones that are living in conditions of poverty, of inequality, conflict, mass urbanization. So managing risk is about not only reducing the hazards, but really getting to addressing those core drivers of vulnerability and exposure. And that's why we are proposing the systemic approaches to risk management as a game-changing solution. It's all about putting in place the right strategies, the policy, the programming, but also the financing to better manage these complex climate and non-climate risks that we are facing. And we believe this game changer provides a comprehensive whole of society approach to build resilient food systems.
Thank you for that answer. It is clear that more integrated, multi-sectoral risk management has the power to transform food systems. And I would be interested in hearing more about who would be responsible in ensuring that this change occurs. So what are key actions that can be done by the public sector, the private sector, and civil society to help push this solution forward?
Thanks a lot. And I think you're right. I think you've really nailed it. It's a whole of society approach that is required. It is not just the responsibility of the public sector. The private sector plays a really critical role as the civil society. But let me start off by saying that first and foremost, political will is a key factor in reducing risk and building resilience. And we know that disaster and climate risk should be more of a core development concern, since disasters are both rooted in development failures, but can also hold back development gains. Now, the cog, if you want, in the wheel of political will for disaster risk reduction is the time frame. Most political decisions are based on short term. They're geared towards short-term political gain. What's going to happen in the next election, for example. And what we need is the political leadership encouraged to take really a longer-term perspective to build resilience. And we need to shift political perspectives to focus on these long-term commitments and also to invest more in young people. And I think that the second commitment that we really need to see is to increase the engagement of those that are on the front line, those that are really most vulnerable to us. And we have to really bear in mind that a threat to one of us is a threat to all of us. And the vaccines for COVID is a very good example. Unless we can really ensure that the entire world is vaccinated, this disaster is going to continue to proliferate. So we need this commitment to really leave no one behind. And this needs to be mainstreamed into our responses, not only to COVID, but also to disaster and climate change. And I think this will allow for a more resilient, but also more equitable approach to food systems resilience. But this requires strengthening multi-sector partnerships and multilateralism. And we do need to break down these institutional silos and recognize that it really requires a whole of society approach. And so we need that collaborative environment where all of the relative actors, including young people, are brought together and they have an equal voice. And we really do think that young people need to be involved in co-designing solutions for resilience building. And the good news is that we are starting to see some of this. The fact that young people have been so vocal on the climate agenda really is inspiring. And I would like to see this type of young people's engagement on other issues related to risk really come to the forefront.
Great. Well, it certainly seems like this solution would ensure and require collaboration from a variety of stakeholders. You already touched on this a little bit, but if there's anything else you would like to add about the role of youth in making this solution a reality, we would all definitely love to hear how we can help.
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, I think we have to remember that children or youth are often the first and most affected when disasters strike. And we know that disasters have a disproportionate impact on young people. I mean, if we look at the COVID pandemic, it has led to a mental health crisis often amongst young people who have been deprived of education and economic opportunities. And this is the same for other types of disasters as well. And I think another important consideration is that young people, children and youth, are going to have to bear the long-term risks imposed by climate change and find solutions to adapt while also preserving the limited natural resources that we have. So really, an empowered youth is core critical for supporting resilience and also a more resilient agri-food systems. And we think that children and youth hold the key to really more transformative innovations which are needed. And this means making sure that young people are involved in decision-making processes, that they are listened to and their thoughts are taken into consideration. And I might just add that the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction has put out guidance on how to engage children and youth in resilience building. And this guide is showing us some really excellent examples. For example, in the Philippines, we have students in public elementary and secondary schools organizing school watching programs to make sure that schools are kept safe. Whereas in Indonesia, we have adolescents advising local government on solutions for drought risk, which is hampering school attendance. So there is a proliferation of good practices out there where young people are standing up, making their voices heard, and playing such a critical role in resilience building. So we really do rely on youth to expand their interest in the climate agenda to a broad range of risks that are actually putting in danger their futures, because I think that with the solutions that they're bringing to the table, we can really make a difference, build resilience on climate and disaster risk, but really also build resilience for food systems. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Loretta, for providing some insight on your solution. And I look forward to working alongside other youth to do what we can to make progress on it through the summit and beyond. So thank you.
Okay. Lastly, we will hear from Fadila Gubari, a business development professional and humanitarian activist in Yemen, and Saskia Osendarp, executive director of the Nutrient Forum, who will discuss launch a coalition for youth in African agriculture on behalf of Action Track 1.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alec. So, hi, Saskia. Actually, it's like before I start thrilling you with my questions, I will start with giving you background about some kind of youth that have not been presented very well in this event so far. Actually, those youth who are coming from a very developing countries, very deprived backgrounds, who are suffering from the protracted conflict. So as in Yemen, the population is more than 50% of the population are from youth who are now suffering from this protracted conflict and who are already, because of the situation of the country, were underprivileged of making their voices heard by the decision makers. With that, I can say that food is not only a power, food is also a tool used in this war. So youth are obliged to continue working within the food system only to survive with being silenced very harsh. So even with the work of the UN agencies and other international actors whom I can say here like CARE, they are unable to make those voices of youth who are in the ground, who are working in the agriculture and the fisheries sectors to be heard. And you will be talking about an alliance of ending the anemia across the world. I was really excited to know how advocacy pressure have made this ending anemia as an indicator of the SDG number 2. And I wonder if there is any sort of advocacy can be held in a less organized settings, like in countries, in developing countries and in other places in which that youth can be advocating for such a change. But in order to understand further how this is a game changer at the higher level, so I would appreciate if you can link both questions in one answer. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Fadila, and thank you for inviting me to speak here. And thank you for your very, very strong and personal introductory remarks. And I think, it makes me very humbled to hear you speak from your context in Yemen, and at the same time hear the power in your voice as a young woman from Yemen who has the ability to help further shape your own future and also the future, I think, of your country. And the solution that we are discussing here today is also about working together and about a cross-sector alliance to end anemia. So it's the Alliance for Anemia Actions, which is a cross-sector alliance that brings together people at country level, but also globally, working in the food systems, but also health systems, and in the environmental sector to address this issue of anemia, which is one of the issues that is highly affecting women and girls across the world. And I think when you are in a situation where, in a high conflict area, there are many challenges that you face every day. But I think bottom line is that if you're not well nourished, or if you're not feeling well, it's very difficult to face these challenges, even in a normal situation, let alone in a conflict situation. And I think we know that anemia, which is a public health problem of significance, is a very complex public health problem as well. And we have not been making progress on reducing anemia. It's an SDG 2 indicator target to reduce anemia by 50% by 2030, but we haven't seen any progress in the prevalence of anemia among women in the last 2 decades. And in fact, we have hardly seen any progress in women's undernutrition in the last 2 decades anywhere. And that's outrageous. And one of the reasons is that particularly anemia is such a complex public health problem that has multiple causes, and the causes can differ by context. We know that, of course, an insufficient intake of nutritious foods that are rich in iron are an important cause, but also infectious diseases and malaria can cause anemia. And at the basis, it is an inequity issue. It's an inequity issue because we know that women and girls are often the ones that eat last and least. So we really need to change this, but in order to change this, we really need a very different approach. And I think that's the game-changing part of this solution, which is to really bring together these coalitions across sectors that start with a deep evaluation of what is the cause of this issue in this specific context, and how can we address it with integrated, combined approaches, while making sure that we also have a strong link from global to national level and the other way around on new evidence and science. And I think your question about advocacy, I think, is a very critical part of this alliance as well, because we need to raise awareness around the issue. We need to raise awareness around the issue that if girls and women do not have good nutrition, that this will have implications for themselves and their future health and the future well-being and economic productivity, but also of the next generation, the children that they carry or the children that they will bring to this world. Because we know that when women and girls are not well nourished and are anemic, this will affect their newborns as well. It will affect the development, the brain development of the newborns, how they do in school, and eventually also how they will be able to contribute to better and safer societies, and eventually to contribute to finally solving these endless conflicts in some parts of this world, of the world, such as the one that you are facing here. So I think that's what this game changer is about, to really make this rapid progress. And I think it's critical for young people to be part of that and to raise your voices, because this is about a problem that has been here for generations and we've not seen progress. So the young women and girls today are facing the same problems as their mothers and their grandmothers decades ago, and that's just outrageous. Because it's even more outrageous because we know what to do to solve it. We know the solutions, and we know how to end it.
Okay, thank you so much. You almost answered so many questions in that theme. I have one more. It's about because in this game changer there was a suggestion about fortifying some food, and it also included how it is needed to be contextualized. So do you think that youth role in the game changer will be from this entry point, or there are more role for the youth in this game changer solution?
Yeah, there are more roles. So I think in order to address this problem, as I said, we need a variety of approaches. And one is to make nutritious foods more affordable and accessible. And I think youth can play a role there to demand that they get access to nutritious foods on the market. And we know what they are, right? The foods that deliver good iron. So these are fruits, vegetables, but also foods from animal source origin that are still not being consumed in sufficient quantities in many contexts in low middle income countries. But also when in certain periods of life, so during adolescence or during girls and during pregnancy, women, they face additional risk of inadequate intakes, and they may need to get access to good antenatal care and supplements through the health system. And as I said, in many settings, it's the environment, so the infectious diseases such as malaria, hookworm infections, that also play an important role in and are an important cause of anemia. So that also needs to be addressed. And then finally, I think girls and young women should raise their voice, and I think that's a powerful voice. And I think policymakers are really keen on learning from you, because this is simply unacceptable that we have not been able to address women's nutrition effectively. And we know it's not easy to end it, but we know what it takes, and we need to really work together across sectors and integrate these interventions. And that if we do so, we will know that we can change the lives of millions, and we can change this generation's future. So I think it's worth the voice of the youth, because as I said, I think that's where policy makers and politicians are listening to.
Yes, sure, Sasaki. And you already pointed out that it's an equality issue as well, because this anemia is only targeting women. And by the way, in Yemen, 70% of women who are between 15 to 50, they are suffering from this.
Yeah.
And I think with that, I have only to thank you so much for the much of information and the enthusiasm you brought. And with that, I think we need to go back to Alec so he can.
Yes, thank you so much, Fadila and Saskia. And thank you for everyone. Thank you to all for sharing your incredible ideas and inspiring us towards accelerated action. Now, let's see what sort of questions have come up from our audience. I believe we have some other questions here. Which question should we go with first here? Take my pick. What are the most effective pressure points youth organizations should coordinate around on ultra-processed foods?
Yeah, thank you. Essentially, what I said before is that we need national dietary guidelines that clearly explain to people why it's important to have a diet based on fresh or minimally processed foods and avoiding ultra-processed foods. So we need dietary guidelines, but also we need policies like taxation, marketing restriction, nutritional labeling, etc. These are, who is in charge of these policies of national dietary guidelines are policymakers. So the pressure point, the main one should be those that formulated policies, so both national and local governments, but also people working in legislation, in Congress. So, what is very important is that the arguments should involve all the consequences of ultra-processed food consumption, meaning diseases like obesity and diabetes, but also effects on the food culture. Because when people start to adopt the ultra-processed diets, they abandon all the food culture, the autonomy, etc., etc. And finally, the environmental aspect is very important. And the youth movements could make alliances between these environment movements, cultural movements, and more health-oriented movement to make a big alliance to put pressure on the politicians to approve good dietary guidelines and good legislation.
Thank you. We have our next question. What mechanisms can make Indigenous peoples family farming products as competitive as agro-industrial foods in agricultural markets?
About indigenous food systems is that they play a role in terms of the well-being of the communities, of which marketing is important but not the only issue. And what is important, I think we found particularly during the COVID period, I am from Northeast India, and we found that local food system thrived because people started sharing amongst themselves. And one of the mechanisms that was found as a lacuna there was the value chain were too long and not short. So one mechanism that needs to be important to improve the marketing of local produce is to have short value chains where the marketing takes place from one village to the other, and where the values are noted, and where they have a certification process that is certified by the group, what is called as the participatory guarantee system. So communities become self-contained amongst themselves, but also trade amongst the nearby villages. And if the value chains are short, that is something that is possible. The other point that is important to recognize is that in the industrial system, everything is a linear line from A to Z. But within the community, which is a pillar that's often forgotten, the relationship is more of a cobweb where people come and trust and rely on each other, and that supporting and caring dimension is a very important aspect. So I think those are the aspects that will be very important to sort of support so that we can empower and the use of local materials. But as I said earlier, is that we indigenous peoples or local communities do not have all the answers. As much as contemporary science, no matter how breakthrough it is, do not have all the answers. We need to combine the two together to fill in the gaps that are there in our respective ways, because insights and perspectives are different and important to be noted. Thank you.
Do we have one more question? Is that our last question? Okay. Now I hand over to my co-moderator, Bibi, to take us through the next section. The floor is yours, Bibi.
Hi everyone, welcome back. Thank you, Alec, for that section and the introduction. I have to say that I'm really loving the music. I don't know if you saw me dancing, but it's really upbeat and it's great to introduce this next section. But before that, we want to give the floor again to you. So as you know, tomorrow is the United Nations Food System Summit, or as a friend would say, the awaited Food System Summit. And we're so glad it's finally here. And we want to hear you, the audience, of what you would like to hear of the leaders presenting tomorrow at the UN Food System Summit. So we are again going to go to menti.com to this online poll for you to fill in your answers. We want to hear from you. So please log in to menti.com using the code 3570 9441. And what do you hope to hear from the leaders tomorrow at the United Nations on food systems? Please log in your answers. I am truly waiting to see what you have to say, especially, well, since the world leaders aren't necessarily so young. All right, so we're getting action plans, not just commitments that will not be followed up. All right. Basically a commitment to have a plan that is put into action. We have another one. I hope for concrete actions at national level, not just global talk. Another one on actionable commitments, not just statements, accountability, not SDGs progress, large-scale commitment and plans for acting on them, clear commitments alongside measurable indicators and time-bound targets. I hope leaders commit to support living wages for food system workers, real action and more than commitment, concrete actions for the three-level government, private, consumer. All right, and that is as much as my screen allows me to see. Oh, wait, no, oh, it's moving, thank you. I hope to hear leaders taking a strong stance to fight equitable livelihoods in their countries and signing on to commitments that will last far past the United Nations Food Systems Summit itself. Understanding the scope of food systems and taking it into action, including private sector, leaders should explicitly amplify the voices of women and youth. Nutrition, indicators, consider climate change, strategy and action plan to drive affordable access and sustainable food systems. And education. Wow, thank you so much for all of these great answers. We will then go on to our panel of interviews. So thank you so much for your answers and for being here as well. So I'd like to introduce our 5 speakers, one who will be joining us by video. So we'll start with a video from Gonzalo Muñoz, high-level climate action champion of COP25 from Chile. We'll have Ryan Kasem, West Asia Regional Director for Youth for Nature, National Coordinator for Global Youth Biodiversity. Tolulope Aina, founder of Tolulope Food and Farms, One Young World Ambassador, focused on nutrition. Stephanie Sargent, working at CGIAR Research Program on Climate, as well as food security. And Michelle Nunn, President and CEO of CARE USA.
I want to see a global shift towards localized and equitable food systems because access to safe, nutritious, and affordable food isn't a privilege, it's a human right.
Yo quiero que los líderes sean honestos y que coloquen la problemática nutricional y de seguridad alimentaria en la agenda del país como prioridad.
I expect the leaders to finally take binding commitments to push forward 2 key agendas: transparency and education so that we understand how food is grown, and pushing forward restoration and resilience in order to make our planet healthy again.
I ask leaders to commit to listening to and resourcing grassroots, Indigenous, worker, and producer-led organizations in determining the next steps after the summit.
I want to see leaders commit to concrete and bold action on supporting the access to healthier diets and reshaping healthier food environments, and that they have transparent accountability mechanisms in place after the summit.
我希望社会各界领袖和政策制定者可以出台相应法规和措施，大力推广健康可持续的植物性饮食，同时推出相应的激励机制，帮助青年人消除从事农业的困难和障碍。
I want leaders to take bold action into incentivizing investment into alternative proteins and specifically cultured meat.
We would love to see from this summit
more opportunities, more commitments, more funding and promises allocated to make sure that young people have a future in agriculture, and that these future young farmers and current young farmers can be the protagonists and actors in the fight for climate change.
What I want as youth from the summit is the construction of an accountability scheme for after the summit that ensures that decision makers take action on the commitments that they've made during the summit.
Thank you. Well, that is great. These are great messages from numerous young people or youth around the world. And now we'll hear as well from Gonzalo Muñoz.
Dear speakers, dear audience, good morning, good afternoon, where you are. Thank you, Sandrine, for inviting me to share some thoughts with you today. You have done a tremendous job with the Food System Summit at putting this topic at the center of the global agenda. And I'm so inspired by that. And today, on the eve of the summit, I wish you every success. Thank you also for allowing me to address you today in this video format, even if I cannot be with you because of my duties as the United Nations High-Level Climate Action Champion for another crucial summit this year, the COP26 at Glasgow in November, only 6 weeks from now. When I am asked what the leaders of today can do for the leaders of tomorrow, the answer for me is an obvious one. As climate champion, my mission is to ensure that all sectors of society pull together to deliver the goal of keeping temperature rise below 1.5 degrees, with the most relevant work to be done by 2050 and mostly 2030, as nearly all governments of the world agreed in the Paris Agreement. So in that year of 2050, I hope to have reached 78 years of age, and many of our youth audience will be about my age today. That includes my 3 amazing daughters, Magdalena, Nina, and Rosario. So as someone so fortunate to be trusted with a position of leadership, I don't want to imagine a world for them, for you, that is not safe, healthy, inhabitable, resilient, and rich with lives such as the one I have been able to experience and benefit so far. That is why, as a leader, and together with my dear good friend Nigel Topping, who is also UN High-Level Climate Action Champion, we're pouring all of our means to create the largest and most credible movement of companies, cities, regions, financial institutions, and educational institutions, among many others, all committed to the same goal of halving emissions by 2030. This is the essence of Race to Zero and Race to Resilient campaign. Please look them up and get involved. We need everyone on board in this race. Today, we've reached 4,482 companies, 800 cities, 720 educational institutions, and many more. We will celebrate all of this at COP26 in Glasgow for all sectors of society, including, of course, youth, and urge more action on 4 overarching goals. Continue to build momentum for 1.5 by 2050, enhance resilience to climate impact we know will happen, mobilize finance for this, and of course, work systemically, just like the Food System Summit has done. I definitely cannot lie to you, despite unprecedented progress, the challenge is huge and we are still far from any kind of safe zone. We should be seeing an 8% emission reduction year on year to be on track, and that is already slipping away. Your safe future is slipping away. And no matter how hard we work, and we do, the hard truth is that you are the ones that will ultimately have to live with whatever the outcomes of today's decisions are. There will be there will not be a way back from that. So the message is get involved and do it now. Waiting is not an option in a crisis like the climate crisis. Working on food system is a great way to address climate and climate crisis that is happening. In the next 2 weeks alone, There are dozens of global events, including Youth for Climate, the pre-COP26 New York Climate Week, and of course, the Food System Summit. I hope to see you there and benefit from your incredible energy. Thank you for supporting us on our mission. We can't do it without you.
Wow, that was a powerful, powerful video. Thank you so much, Gonzalo, in bringing that energy, momentum, resilience, working systemically, having the access to finance, all true. And yes, there are many, many events happening on the topic that we are going to discuss right now. So what we've seen about the video before and what we're going to be hearing now are really the demands that we demand from leaders, right, as our representatives. And we will be focusing on the question now, what can the leaders of today do for the leaders of tomorrow? And with that, here on the stage are going to be Ryan Kassem, an activist from Lebanon, then Tolulupe Aina about nutrition in Kenya, Stephanie Sargent from CGIAR Kenya, and Michelle Nunn, CEO of CARE USA. Hi, everyone. It is such a thrill to be here with you. Awesome. Fantastic. All right. Well, we will start off with a key message from each and then some questions afterwards. So we'll start off with your message, Ryan, of what can the leaders of today do for the leaders of tomorrow?
Thank you very much. I would say, generally speaking, we ask that they teach us from their mistakes, the lessons learned. We want to know what kind of mistakes they've been doing that they want to correct, which they don't have time to in the near future. So that we, when we walk, hopefully, in their footsteps, that we don't make the same mistakes, that we're equipped to lead on the new reforms and policies that we ask. For now, for the Food Systems Summit, we call upon the decision makers for a few things in specific, and representing the Middle East and North Africa myself, we demand decision makers to prioritize regional food issues, talking about economics and politics as a priority for the MENA region. We demand to set up a global fund for food systems, just as the Convention on Climate Change, and we demand that food policies are tailored in every country within the nationally determined contributions. When it comes to the Convention on Climate Change, the Convention has listed agriculture and food within its topics. Under land use, under agriculture, in COP23, the Convention on Climate Change formulated what they call the Coronivia Joint Work on Agriculture, which has 6 elements on food. But it focuses on food security. It focuses on natural resources. It doesn't have a holistic approach to Food Systems Summit. So when we want to combine the Convention on Climate Change with the Food Systems Summit, it needs to be holistic. And so this is my message in general, that we'll talk about the CBD in a few seconds or in a few minutes. But yeah, that's my message. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for your opening remark. I have a follow-up question regarding your work in biodiversity. And so how do you think we can connect the summit outcomes with the Global Biodiversity Framework 2030?
So the framework is very clear. It has targets for the post-2020 framework. It has 21 targets. From those 21 targets, there are 5 targets specifically for food systems. And so it's dictated how or what we should change in order to protect biodiversity, talking about activities from agriculture. So the Food Systems Summit doesn't need to create new targets to protect biodiversity from the different components within food systems. It only has to look at what the CBD has produced and the interventions. There are even interventions from youth on a national level within the CBD for the post-2020 framework. It has to look at those targets and work through it so that we don't lose time, because as everybody said today, we have 9 harvest seasons left. So the Food System Summit needs to look at those targets and work to achieve the targets set by the CBD and not create its own targets from the beginning.
All right, very well understood. Yeah, so we're building up on what is already taking action. Thank you so much, Ryan. We'll go now with Tolu Lope. Are you here? Yay! Thank you so much. Welcome.
Thank you, Bibi.
All right. Oh, thank you. Thank you. So please comment on give us your opening remarks on what should the leaders of today do for the leaders of tomorrow.
Greetings to everyone all over the world. I will start my statement with sharing my personal story. It stems from no mother ever prays to bury a child, even more so before the tender age of 5. This was the sad fate of Ayinke, a mother of 3 boys who worked at a cassava processing facility in a rural community in southwest Nigeria, where I interned during my undergraduate study at the university. Ayinke was a very hardworking woman who provided ad hoc services for the facility. She was the breadwinner of the family, with sadly an irresponsible husband. Grief ensued one morning when the news broke that Kolade was dead, a pleasant young boy who tagged along with his mother everywhere. I later realized from research that Kolade died from malnutrition and the consumption of poorly processed food, in this case, a commonly consumed staple called gari, which is made from cassava. I founded my first business, Tolulope Foods, in 2015, an emerging agribusiness in Nigeria determined to bridge the gap of malnutrition, hunger, poverty, and unemployment by sustainably producing hygienic, nutritious, and affordable food for local consumption and exports. Tolulope Foods engages 50 rural women in cassava production and processing activities daily, which is a guaranteed source of livelihood for them. And through this engagement, they've been able to afford for their family and provide their out-of-school children access to basic education. We have trained over 200 rural women on quality hygienic processing techniques, which has made their product command better prices in the market. This also has a positive reflection on their livelihood. In 2019, I founded the Youth Advocate Nigeria, which I led as president for a year before I stepped down from the role. In a year, we impacted over 600 beneficiaries in physical trainings, events, and mentorship with a growing community of 10,000 youths and women across Africa. I have actively been involved in providing mentorship and support as a team lead and team member with various groups and organizations, with collective tractions of over 2,000 youths and women trained across various fields of agriculture. I have been involved in the sustainable production of food on over 1,000 hectares of land across various states in Nigeria. I hope to expand this capacity to other countries in Africa and globally. Through my experience from the aforementioned project, I founded AgroLearn in July 2020, an EdTech startup focused on bridging the skills gap of the next generation of agrarian leaders by offering quality on-site and online trainings, e-learning. The e-learning was necessitated because the pandemic emphasized the need to innovate and adequately respond to the growing trends. This initiative stems out of a year-long research through engagement with relevant stakeholders across Africa. In less than 1 year of development, we have successfully secured support from Remark International Farmer-to-Farmer program through funding from USAID to develop courses for AgroLearn. We have organized physical trainings for 2 cohorts with several beneficiaries. We look forward to more global collaborations going forward to ensure that the right education and practical methodologies for growing, processing, handling, distribution, consumption, and disposal of foods are imbibed among the next generation of food soldiers. As brilliant as my work may sound, it has come along with many challenges, and in some cases, have led to serious mental health crises, mostly because I am amputated by challenges often beyond my control. As a firm and passionate youth who believes so much in the future of food, and it is often devastating when I see my little effort is impeded by policy inconsistency, poor enabling environment, lack of support and financing, and the obvious gender gap. Irrespective, I remain unflinchingly committed towards revolutionizing our food systems and will stop at nothing to make this a reality. I believe I speak the minds of many youths championing great initiatives across the globe. My message today is simple. I urge our leaders to grant youth a seat at the table, not just in dialogue session, but also throughout the implementation process. It is noteworthy to commend the impact of youth during the pandemic. Many youth played frontier roles in reshaping our food system. It is no longer negotiable or confusing the impact and role of youth and what youth can bring to the table. Kindly prioritize engaging us throughout the process of making nutritious food available for consumption from farm to fork in a sustainable way. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tolulope. What an amazing and brilliant message you have just given us from the very beginning with cassava that I love. You spoke about affordability, education, farming as well with the 1,000 hectares that you're doing, and also the youth not only at the table, but youth in the implementation of it. Thank you so much. And now we'll move forward with Stephanie. Hi, Stephanie. Welcome to the stage. Glad to have you here. Hi. Well, Stephanie, you heard about oh, sorry. Before that, of course, please give us your opening remark on what should the leaders of today be doing for the leaders of tomorrow.
Well, firstly, thank you for this opportunity to speak at such an exciting but also timely event. So climate change doesn't look like it'll be stopping for anyone, and our current food systems continue to contribute to and be affected by climate change. The agricultural sector is one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions and is thus slowing down our efforts to reach the Paris Climate Agreement. The question is, how can we reverse this trend and transform food systems from the ground up? The UNFSS has identified 4 cross-cutting enablers to food system transformation: gender, human rights, finance, and innovation. I personally have worked on the role of innovation through the global campaign on transforming agricultural innovation for people, nature, and climate, which seeks to shift the dial on innovation for agriculture at COP26. But perhaps a 5th enabler should have been added: youth engagement. UNFSS and COP26 are key milestones to bring about a systemic change, but they won't succeed without making youth a priority. And at a UNFSS independent dialogue hosted by the African Youth Agripreneurs, AYA, Dr. Agnes Kalibata, the president of AGRA and the UN Secretary General's special envoy to the UNFSS, said youth are not victims. We are going to be the solutions. And that is what Active Food, Active Change aims to do, by encouraging young people from around the world to not only come up with initiatives and actions themselves, but also to push actors like governments and businesses to make effective and efficient changes to transform food systems. Lacelle Vincent, a student speaker for the CCAF's Climate Shot event on Monday, rightfully pointed out that youth from around the world are already working to transform food systems, from strengthening the rights of young people in marginalized communities to using social media to advocate for climate action and food sovereignty. And in order for us to be a sufficient solution, youth must be empowered, and to ensure that specifically within the food sector, that there will be a new generation of farmers and other essential food system actors to take over. Youth should not be afraid to make demands and push for accountability of our current leaders. We will eventually inherit the world left to us, but action must be taken right now in order to address climate change, which will not wait for our current youth leaders to reach positions of power. And this means the leaders of today must listen to the ideas and initiatives youth are driving and help facilitate them, for example, through access to finance and innovative solutions. And, this event creates space for the voice of youth, so don't be afraid to speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And you are so right. I mean, we need to take action now because what you said, time will not wait for youth to get on those positions of leadership of the ones that are now in their current age. So true. Thank you so much. Love the agriculture innovation as well, and youth as solutions to be empowered. And just taking up and building up on what was said before on youth being the implementators, and what Gonzalo said as well, focusing on climate action in his video. What are your takes on the road towards COP26 and the climate actions that are needed ahead?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think on the road towards COP26 and these other climate actions, youth will continue to demonstrate the initiatives and actions that will make a transformation of food systems. Even in pre-COP, we have the Youth for Climate Driving Ambition, and events such as Driving Global Youth Action for Climate Adaptation of Food Systems, which is being hosted by CCAF's Wageningen University, the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, and the Food Foundation, which is all in support of Agri-Food Act for Change, really give youth the opportunity to further showcase the ideas, pledge to make a transformation, and also speak with key actors such as the FAO to kind of, discuss how we can transform food systems. And at Agri-Food Act for Change as well, we have our 17 actions that can transform food systems, and we're voting on our top 5. And I think on this road, we are demonstrating all of these crazy actions and ideas, but it's really for these leaders to, at COP26 and in future climate actions, to actually listen to us and to actually take into consideration what we're saying. It's great that we've been invited to speak at these events, and it's great that we're being invited, more now to really take part in this decision making. But if it's all for a performance, then it really is futile, isn't it? It really won't help if the leaders don't actually listen to us and take our ideas and put it into, the actions that they kind of create for the next few years. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And I hope there are questions when we wrap this up on the Q&A of how to do this. I know, well, that is one of my questions, but thank you so much, Stephanie. We'll go now with Michelle. Hi, Michelle, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I can't wait to hear your opening remarks on what should the leaders of today do for the leaders of tomorrow.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm the CEO of CARE, which is an organization that works in 100 different countries, reached over 90 million people, and focuses on saving lives and on defeating poverty. And we know that the issue of hunger and food systems is critical to that, which is why I'm also chairing the Action Track 4, which is focused on equitable livelihoods in the food systems. And I'll just say that over half of the world's population depends upon those people who make their living from within the food system. So it's incredibly important. Young people are disproportionately impacted by these livelihoods and the inequities, the exploitation, the marginalization, and they also have the capacity to drive the change that we're looking for. And so the answer to the question is, what can the leaders of today, and I consider myself, I'm one of the elders, I'm the elder in this group, and so I think it's particularly incumbent that we take the advice. Ryan, you started by saying that we need to acknowledge our mistakes, and I think we need to approach the work and the conversations with humility and with transparency. That we challenge ourselves, that we allow ourselves, those leaders of today, to be challenged by the perspectives and I think the capacity to reimagine that young people bring, that we create the space for them to sit at the table, but we also, it's not sufficient to just give the space, but also really amplify voices, that we ensure that we're engaging diverse young people, that we are bringing in the voices of women, of girls, of Indigenous people. And lastly, I would say that we are also enabling the finance, the capital, and ultimately the transfer of power to the capacity for young people to be the leaders of today and tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Michelle. We have a message actually from Alec replying to you that he sends his best to Bill Haber.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Alec. All right. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. And I really love that you use the word elder, because we've been hearing as well from Indigenous populations mentioning the traditions of their grandmothers or grandparents, but like before, and how we take it into these new youth perspectives and how do we merge them together. So loving and thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
And here goes the question. So how do you improve small-scale farmer livelihoods in the emerging actions from the summit process?
Yeah. So some of the work ahead, as you all know, will take place in coalitions, alliances across sectors. And one of those is that I think is particularly important is focused on living wages and living incomes and decent work for those people who work in food systems. And we have to center that, I think, around smallholder farmers. Most people, I think, don't recognize that smallholder farmers produce the majority of food in much of the world, and yet they are often the ones that go hungry and they don't have the capacity to feed their own families. And so, one of the proposals, for instance, is how do we expand and scale farmer schools, farmer field schools, and business schools that enable smallholder farmers to have diversification of livelihoods, access to markets, ensure that we have ownership of land. Let's make sure also that we are prioritizing gender equity within smallholder farmer communities and ecosystems, because too often we know, for instance, that women don't have the equal access to the basics that would enable us to increase their productivity and yield. And in fact, actually, there's research that says that 150 million more people could be fed in the world if women, smallholder farmers, just had equal access to the training and to the markets. And so those are just a few of the things, but I think we have to have a concerted focus on centering smallholder farmers going forward and to ensure that they have the capacity for dignified lives and fair and equitable livelihoods.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And yeah, I just keep on thinking on the smallholder farmers, that perhaps they're not always at the table. And I'd like to open up this question from the audience to all of the panelists today here in this section. Thank you. You're all popping up on the screen. It's lovely. Thank you. Oh, and also I wanted to mention something from that Ryan, you said, and Michelle, you said it as well, about learning from our mistakes. And I think we really need to open our eyes on what those were. And not just us, but the current leaders of today as well. But, I consider myself a leader of today as well. You too, but we'll be moving forward as well in the future. Hopefully with learning from all of these mistakes, but also good practices. All right, so opening it up to the panel discussion, or answering this question in 6 minutes. What is the first ground action you would like to see be implemented after this summit, and what you've all spoken of? Whoever wants to go first.
So may I go first?
Yes.
Okay. For me, more of action, less of talk, because we have a lot of talks ongoing. I would like to see the identification of our youth leaders that are currently doing brilliantly well, being engaged in the implementation process, like I said earlier, and through providing that capacity for young people who are actually leading, would also trickle down to the grassroots. That, I feel, is the next step, identification, and then giving young people the capacity to be able to better influence our food systems.
Thank you, Tolulope. Fantastic. Who else wants to go?
I can go next, if that's okay.
All right, Sandy, and then Ryan.
Sorry, thank you. So for my answer, I'm going to take that part of the question on the ground quite literally. So it would be great to see the leaders actually implementing actions with young farmers in Africa, like on the ground, and actually making sure that all these great actions and solutions that we come up with are accessible for these young farmers, literally quite on the ground, whether that be, through language or through the dissemination of information in a way that the young people can understand it and have the information passed around. But that is something I would like to see being done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Ryan.
All right, thank you very much. I think on a global level, we were able to group all the major stakeholders from the different sectors in society, and they know what to do now because we have this summit. But this doesn't eliminate the barrier for people to be included. So this calls on the ground of decision makers on a national level, going on the ground and asking the farmers, asking the youth, asking everybody within the different components of the food system what they think is right and not, because we try to implement global actions on a local scale, and we found, that people sometimes they didn't like it or it didn't work for them on a local scale because they have different priorities in their regions. So I would say on a global level, we know what to do, but on a local level, we still need to learn. We still need to go in person, talk, have those discussions in the villages, in the small communities, until we reach everybody so that we can draft a proper global strategy, so that we remove completely the barrier of inclusivity within food systems.
I think that's exactly the word, right? Inclusivity. You said it. Yeah, fantastic. Michelle, do you want to add something on that?
Just a final, I think that we should begin with ensuring that we build in accountability to center the voices of young people, to ensure that we are actually taking action, and to ensure that we are, I would say, putting in the center those people who work within the food systems. And let's start with smallholder farmers. So mainly, let's start at the end, which is how will we hold ourselves accountable and how will we commit to that?
And a follow-up question on that to everyone: how do we hold ourselves accountable, or how do we hold the leaders of today accountable as well to be implementing all these actions?
Can I go first?
All right.
Yes. So in the implementation process, we need transparency. And so with being transparent about the whole process, that way it shows what each person has to bring to the table. I for one don't want to believe that a lot of people don't want to act the right way. But when the environment is not enabling, some food system actors, for example, those that are involved in enacting the right policies are not doing their work, then it jeopardizes the efforts of everyone at the grassroots. So we need an all-inclusive approach that is accountable and through a transparent process. How we will be able to achieve this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, last one. All right, Ryan, come on in.
Sure, anybody else wants to come in? Okay, cool. In my opinion, I think it's more important that we create an accountability scheme, a legally binding scheme, more important than the discussions being held today or in the Convention on Climate Change or the CBD or any other summit. It's the legally binding scheme, because we all know the US left the Paris Agreement, then it came back. Were they legally bind to it? No, it's all a voluntary experience within the global discussion. So it's very, very, very difficult to create this legally binding scheme. And it sometimes create this, feeling of backing away from countries if you put that legally binding scheme, because their priorities on a national level change from time to time. So I don't have the answer, but all I know is that this is the most important thing to think about at the current moment.
Thank you so much, Ryan, and for emphasizing on that. Well, thank you so much for your time. We have come to an end of this section, and now we'll go next to some very exciting initiatives with Alec.
For our final session of the day, we have an exciting lineup of introductions to initiatives we would like to share with you. Firstly, we will hear from the Action Track Consortium Initiative in conversation with Martin Frick, Deputy to the Special Envoy for the UN Food Systems Summit. Second, we will revisit the Eat Lancet guidelines and hear from Johan Rockstrom and the Eat Lancet 2.0. Johan will be followed by Eat for Change, an initiative from the Worldwide Fund for Nature. We then hear from Act for Food, Act for Change, a global youth-led campaign, the food system monitoring project, as well as the initiative Food at COP, a youth-led campaign for climate-friendly food at the UN Climate Change Conference, COP26. First to the virtual stage are my good friend, Dr. Gunhild Stortelen, founder and executive chair of EAT and the chair of Action Track 2, João Campari, the global leader of WWF's Food Practice and chair of Action Track 3, in conversation with Martin Frick.
Alec, thank you so much for moderating us, and let's dive right into it. João, we have been working jointly 1.5 years. What is the main thing? What do we really need to get right to get sustainable food systems by 2030? What is more important than anything else, João?
Thanks, Martin. Delighted to be here. I always like to remind ourselves that we only have 9 harvests until 2030. Actually, in some places, today's 8 harvests, by which time we must have broken with the unhealthy, unsustainable, unjust, and frankly, dangerous trajectories that our food systems are currently on. 9 harvests. Stop and think about that for a second. The time is now to transform the food system. You know, we cannot wait longer. We cannot lose time. And what this will require is actually quite clear. Unprecedented mobilization of will, of making very hard, ambitious commitments, and unprecedented collaboration for action. And we have a plan for that. I'll share more in a minute about the Food Forward Consortium. Over to you, Martin.
Thanks, João. Gunhild, the big shift, how has this process, how has this Food System Summit helped to prepare it? What's your impression?
Thanks, Martin. I'm delighted to be here. Well, I think one of, for sure, the most important achievements so far is really the shift in mindsets because now more than 140 countries now understand that food is a system and that system is broken. And then through the work of the action tracks over the past year, we have built a powerful menu of solutions to draw from, and we have built a set of global coalitions to really ensure that countries and for sure other stakeholders have access to the resources and the tools and expertise that they need to really translate the solutions into game-changing action on the ground, which is what really matters. But let's not forget that the summit is literally just the end of the beginning. So now is the time to roll up our sleeves and collaborate to ramp up action at all levels, from global to local, to fix food within this decade. And we know we can do it. We have the science to say that we can.
Gunhild, thanks very much. That sounds far-reaching and pretty hard. Does it have to be so hard? Is incremental change not an alternative?
Well, absolutely. It's all hands on deck, and for sure, many small steps can add up to meaningful improvements. Absolutely. But we need to stop fooling ourselves, and we need to recognize that incremental change is simply no longer good enough. We need to transform the system. And as I mentioned, that the first and most basic shift for that to happen is really about the mindsets and that we understand that food is a system. And the next fundamental shift that we need is really changing the way we value food. And we need to start factoring in all the huge hidden costs and start applying true cost accounting to policies and investments and literally all decision making.
So, João and Gunhild, we are approaching about 100 food systems pathway of governments. What do you intend to do to help them really going through this fundamental shift?
Martin, I think that considerable creative energy and forward momentum is generated when organizations and networks join forces, right? This is evidenced by the work that we did together in the action tracks. Together, we have mobilized and built a vast global community across multilateral organizations, governments, academia, civil society, and businesses. This is a true force for change, and we want to keep it going. And this is why I'm very happy to announce here that the 6 action track organizations, GAIN, EAT, WWF, CARE, Club of Rome, and ICAD, are launching a Food Forward consortium together. Over the coming decade, the Food Forward, via the Food Forward, we will work jointly to support, deliver support to national governments, local governments, and other key food system stakeholders in driving the fundamental shifts in incentives, policies, and practices that our time and challenge demand. So watch for that space. There will be more on Food Forward coming up.
Thank you very much. Gunhild and Joao, Food Forward, what is it exactly going to do?
We are in the business of co-creation, isn't that what we are saying? Obviously this is supposed to be a broad and inclusive tent, and we need to work the details out over the next couple of months. But for now, we envisage that the initiative will have at least 2 interconnected work streams, one global that will, amongst other, focus on developing and applying a true value of food metric to guide decision making. And then, as Joe also alluded to, one national or local work stream that really will support national pathways if we are asked to do so, of course. And last but important to say is that both these work streams will build on and really complement whatever the UN and the Rome-based agencies and the CFS will end up doing after the summit. So this is not adding another layer of complexity, but really filling gaps and complementing what is already in the making.
Great. Wow.
Yeah, if I may, well, we want to keep presenting this offer and expand it to bring many other organizations on board, okay? So we want to discuss Food Forward with our current partners along the journey in the action tracks, with potential or new partners, governments, potential funders, and other stakeholders to join this force. We hope to have it up and running by the middle of next year, hopefully. So please stay tuned, and more importantly, stay engaged and get more involved. Thank you. Over to you, Martin.
Thank you both. Gunhild Storda and Joao Campari, putting Food Forward. Back to the moderator.
Thank you so much.
Nothing threatens planetary health and people's health as much as the broken food system. 25% of greenhouse gas emissions caused by the food system. Biodiversity loss is primarily caused by exploiting and expansion of agriculture, and up to 10 million people die prematurely because of unhealthy food. Food will determine the future of humanity on Earth. That is why we launched the first Eat Lancet Commission, to try for the first time to gather scientists across different disciplines to define quantitative safe targets for a healthy diet from sustainable food systems as a universal guide for a transition towards a healthy future for humanity on planet Earth. Now is the time, after the 2019 launch of the first report, to work towards the scientific update. Science is rushing forward. We have so much new evidence. And moreover, the universal planetary health diet needs to be translated into manageable focus on solutions in the diversity of cultures and geographies across the world. I also foresee that the planetary health diet can now be used in order to really be a solution towards dealing with the climate crisis, but even with the pandemic reduction strategies we have in the future. We know that pandemics are predominantly zoonosis, viral spillovers from nature via domestic animals to humans. A planetary health diet can help us to build resilience in nature and in climate to reduce risks of future pandemics. So we need a new Eat Lancet 2.0 to update the science, but also to explore acceleration and transformative pathways for a true journey back to a safe operating space for humanity on planet Earth, both in terms of health, but also in terms of planetary stability. This is why we now take up the baton for the second Eat Lancet Commission work.
The food we produce and eat is the single largest human pressure on nature. To achieve food systems which protect nature while ensuring everyone has enough nutritious food, we need a global transition to healthy and sustainable diets. And that's what Eat for Change is all about. Everyone has a role to play. Eating plant-based is our superpower to fight climate change, reverse nature loss, and help feed more people. We can also have an impact beyond our own plate. Achieving sustainable food systems needs system-level change. Eat for Change is a consortium of 13 organizations and a network of active youth around Europe and Latin America. With trainings, an online platform, youth summits, campaigns run by our partners, and more, we empower youth to challenge decision makers and businesses, engage their peers, to build a better future one bite at a time.
Hunger and malnutrition.
Climate change.
Unsafe food.
Deforestation.
Poverty.
Soil erosion.
Inequality.
Human rights violations and abuses.
Food systems adds to these problems.
We are the future.
The young.
Generations.
But our future is uncertain.
Food.
Environment. People.
We're all connected.
Our beautiful planet
should nourish us.
Food shouldn't kill us.
Food doesn't have to cost the earth.
Food can be a way to create.
Not to destroy.
To learn and to honor and to protect.
Our past and our future.
To build mutual respect.
Fairness.
Understand.
Collaboration.
We must act for food.
And act for change.
So we can have
good food for all.
We can pledge.
We can act.
We can change our world.
Join the movement
for better food systems.
Hi, my name is Jess Fonzo, and I'm a professor at Johns Hopkins University. In partnership with 27 academic institutions, NGOs, and UN agencies, we've brought together food system experts to work on what we call the Food Systems Monitoring Countdown Project. The idea of the project is to propose a rigorous science-based monitoring framework to support evidence-based policymaking and guide public and private decisions and support those who are holding decision makers accountable towards food systems transformation. What we've done is we've worked on a framework and we're publishing it this October. Over the next several years, we are going to be selecting and tracking indicators for analysis of food systems performance and accountability over the next decade with an end goal of 2030, the SDGs. So our next steps, we are going to be vetting indicators. We're going to be refining a list of indicators and doing some analysis on those indicators into what we hope is a yearly or an every other year publication that goes through a peer review process. We are opening ourselves up to different stakeholders and collaborators to join us, help us come up with a monitoring framework that will help in the accountability process towards better food systems transformation.
Hi, my name is Silke, and together with others, I founded the Food at COP campaign. We are an international youth-led grassroots initiative advocating for climate-friendly menus at major international conferences. Our current target is campaigning for plant-based catering at COP26. The objective of the conference is clear, and this ambition needs to be reflected in the logistics of the event as well. Our campaign aims to spur conversation on what foods we choose to produce and eat, considering our Earth's limited resources. As a society, we must ensure that individuals can make good choices without putting the planet at risk. Therefore, we need to mainstream plant-based food options. Reducing the overall impact of a conference by ordering plant-based and climate-friendly food is easy to implement, has a direct impact, and symbolizes immediate action at a summit that is mainly about talking. Vegetables, fruits, legumes, nuts, and seeds are proven to be less impactful on the planet than meat, dairy, and most seafood. In addition, they're good for your body and mind. We have discussed so much about food today. Let's embrace the riches of nature. Let's eat tasty, healthy, diverse, and inclusive meals all together at the next in-person conference. Be good to your planet. Be good to yourself.
Okay. Fantastic initiatives. I can't wait to see how these initiatives develop in the months to come. We are reaching the end of this event, and I want to thank you, Ibi, the excellent co-moderation, and to thank all of you participants and speakers.
Thank you so much, Alec. It's been such a wonderful time spending this, getting to know everyone, all of the initiatives as well, and I hope the time as well. These special moments are the ones that we get into our minds to craft more in the implementation. And Alec, if I just can say, a couple of years back, 3 years ago, I was in one of your sessions on food and climate, and that was a time that got me to merge food, climate, and human rights in what I do today. So thank you for that.
I just think it's exciting to see all this commitment, because this link between climate change and food is the issue for us to deal with today. But thank you for doing this with me. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for the invitation. And now we have one final closing youth statement from Sophie Healy-Tho from Ireland, and we also have Yugratna Srivastava from India. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Alec. Thank you, everyone. Can't wait to hear more. And the stage is yours, Sophia and Yugratna.
Thank you so much. Thank you for giving us this opportunity, and it was really insightful to listen to the discussions and contributions today. My name is Sophie Healy-Tho. I'm a food advocate, campaigner, and activist from Ireland. I've always been interested in food, but I started to be really active in this space when I was about 14. But these months in the run-up to United Nations Food Systems Summit tomorrow has probably been some of the most intense I've ever experienced. It's been emotional, and at times I'll admit I have been angry and I've been really disappointed. But I've also been surprised and inspired. And today, coming together, even in this virtual space, has been hopeful. But I don't feel hopeful every day. So when we feel like this, we really have to hold on to it. There's not a lot of hope going spare for people in our generation, and even less for younger ones. Growing food insecurity, climate emergency, tipping points, mass extinctions, rising malnutrition, vaccine inequality, everything inequality. But we have to have hope, because what else is there? We can't be resigned to perpetuating a system where hunger is a basic fact of life for millions, or where healthy, nourishing food is a dream for billions. A system where people working to grow and raise and cook and bring food to others are undervalued, exploited, and abused. We shouldn't stand for it, and we won't. But it's a lot knowing what to do. Some of us can vote with our wallets. We can go meat-free on Mondays and shop ethically. We can cut down on junk food that's leeching years off our lives. We can raise our voices about all of this and more, perhaps, if we're lucky enough to live in a system that privileges us to make those choices, and one where we won't be targeted for speaking out. But some wallets have always been larger than others, and some voices have always been louder than others. And we need to make sure that these forces are pushing our planet in the direction it needs to go. We need policymakers who are bold. We need big businesses to think outside the box. Our food systems are massively shaped by decisions that government leaders make, that businesses make, that business innovators make. These people have power to drive change on a large scale. And these are people who need to step up and wield that power for good. We need concerned people from all walks of life to work together on this challenge. Together is a tough word for a lot of people. It's easier to say than do for a lot of people, especially in food systems where not everyone has a history of togetherness and getting along. We'd be naive to say conflicts of interest don't exist, don't derail processes with all the best intentions. But then food is something that's been bringing people together for millennia. We're more than atomized individual consumers, and we need to start acting like it. I'm a food activist, and some people hear activists like it's a bad thing. But if we're not active, then we're passive. And who can be passive when we're faced with a situation like we are today? If nothing else, I hope this summit tomorrow serves as a wake-up call. We can all be food activists. We can all be active in reshaping our food systems. There's an Irish proverb that says, "Tu smá leat na hibra," which means a good start is half the work. And I really hope that this work, all this work that we've done to reach tomorrow's summit means it will be a good start of something really, really great. Over to you, Gratna.
Thank you very much, Sophia. And I'm so honored and so inspired to hear your words in such an emotional and meaningful perspectives that you highlighted. Thank you so much for the floor. I want to begin by congratulating the organizers of this event, especially in shaping the narrative of this event, looking towards the future and food being the future. I could not be more honored to be closing this day-long marathon, and as we move into the UN Food Systems Summit tomorrow. Oh my God, what a process. For more than last 15 months, the summit has demonstrated a unique and powerful method of engaging young people across the world. Youth have not only participated in the summit, the pre-summit and its deliberations, but also engaged in the leadership of the summit process through structures such as the vice chairs, Action Champions networks, liaison group, focus group, and many other methods through which young people organized themselves and were able to contribute to the deliberations of the Food Systems Summit. When people or young people from countries and backgrounds like mine hear about United Nations hosting high-level summits and processes, it often seems unlikely that youth will actually be invited to engage. It seems like an uphill battle for civil society organizations and youth organizations to even engage with the Secretariat or have a seat at the table or even be invited to this table. So the fact that this high-level meeting of the UN has engaged youth in this manner should be built upon for the upcoming high-level meetings of the UN, such as the Stockholm International Meeting in 2022 and the future summit that is being planned for 2023, which is literally going to be about the rights of future generations. While the summit will conclude tomorrow, it will be important to keep track and examine how the implementation of the outcomes of the summit would be taking place. I want to emphasize especially on the upcoming Food Systems Coordination Hub as the follow-up of the summit, which will be hosted by FAO in cooperation with other Rome-based agencies. It is important and crucial that youth organizations are included in the design of this hub since its inception, and that they have voice in structures such as the advisory board of the hub that is being constituted. Opportunities should also be made available for youth to be part of implementation of these activities. And while we harness new energies, engage more young people and institutions to engage globally, Let us also work with established movements, constituencies, and organizations that have been advocating on the rights of food advocates for the grassroots voices since ages. It is absolutely essential that the civil society mechanism of the Commission for World Food Security is engaged in the inception, since the inception of such future deliberations, and that civil society constituencies that the UN and member states have themselves created for these processes are able to actually feed into the deliberations and outcomes. Let us not leave anyone behind in the spirit of 2030 agenda. Finally, I want to highlight that earlier this month, the UN Secretary General released the Our Common Agenda report, which highlighted that sustainable food systems and strong forest protection could generate over 2 trillion per year of economic benefits, create millions of jobs, and improve food security. Thereby, it is very crucial to remember the nexuses between the food security, climate change, and revisiting our unsustainable consumption and production patterns, so that we have more greater equity in resource use, less food waste, and sound management of chemicals and waste to minimize adverse effect on human health and the environment. People and planet are not for sale. United Nations and international decision-making spaces are not a property of rich and the powerful and the resourceful. They belong to the public. They belong to young people. They belong to the grassroots communities and those that are in front lines and fighting this battle from the nations that are submerging, from the places that have been historically excluded. It's not about giving them seat at the table. It's about also going to their table, empowering them to create tables and come to these spaces to share their perspectives. It is not a one-way street. It is always a two-way street, and let us remember that. I come from a country where over 70% or 60% of the economy is an agriculture-based economy. Today, while I'm sitting in my house and addressing this ceremony leading up to the Food System Summit tomorrow, 20 kilometers from my house, when I go outside, there are young women that are being married off at the age of 15, those that are supporting agriculture, farmlands, going out there every day, while we are every day talking in the UN system. We cannot talk about them without them. Nothing about us without us. And this is a principle that should be taken forward for youth engagement and engagement of the rights holders communities in the processes of the Food System Summit. Finally, I want to highlight, and as I close, that this has been a tremendous process, and there is a compendium coming out on youth engagement, on how youth engagement in the Food System Summit has been, and let us ensure that this actually feeds into the future deliberations of the process. While we fight the COVID-19 pandemic, as we celebrate the Food System Summit tomorrow, let us remember that building back better and building back stronger are not just jargons that we can talk about, but these are things that we have to implement in our day-to-day lives and in our day-to-day discourse. And I want to conclude by saying what I mentioned again: the policies that are being made today are going to affect the young and future generations of tomorrow, and it is only right to involve them in the discussions that you're having. Nothing about us without us. Thank you very much.